Alright everybody, welcome to old software on SGI Irix tutorials. This is a quick rundown of Softimage 3D before we get into some desktop captured ones, so you have to forgive my phone on a stand as a test run for this. Alright, let's see. I think you can kind of see everything here. Yeah, let's see. Something a little bit here. I think we got most of it. Okay. Alright, first off, my mouse is going haywire. Every time I start Softimage, I always have to, the mouse gets set on its own. Mouse speed, and then there's a default mouse speed, and then after I start Softimage, it resets that, so I always have to go back and kind of set it up again so I can get around there quick. Okay, so here's the default interface. Let's see here. You get your perspective window and your right, front, and top views, and there are these buttons over here on the left, which are some of them stay the same, but these ones down here change depending on what mode that you're in. These are pretty consistent. These are consistent on the right here, no matter what panel you're in. These just kind of indicate what's going on. There's this little row down here, this L, M, and R, which is little hints that let you know if you're doing a shortcut or you're on a tool. It'll tell you what the left mouse and right mouse are doing. This is object mode, tag mode, center, text. These are all like different modes when you're in different selection modes. There's when you select an item at an entire sphere or a cube or a grid, you're going to select it at the object level, and if you want to do like polygons, points, and edges, you'll do it at the tag level, and we'll get more into that later. So the first thing we want to do is start with some quick keys. So I'll start with W. If you hit W when you're over these windows, you'll see a little square show up here in the middle. And this says, and you can see down here that these are already starting with hotkeys. You already start to give you instructions. So if you hold W and you click this little guy here, you can, resize your views. You can kind of like, hey, I need to look at the front view, I need to look at the top view, I need to look at the right view. Now, these also have different modes, so you can do that. You can like have one take over the whole thing by clicking this top right button here. So if you just want to jump from the fore view to the main, you can click this top upper right. You see the little window there, and it'll jump your entire view to that view. So you can go top, perspective, etc. So that's W, and it's the shortcut key for, you hold W down, you're able to resize this guy. If you got it strange, you can hit M and it'll snap it right back to the middle. So the M being the middle mouse button, sorry. Hold W, drag left, and then hit the M, the middle mouse button to reset it. Okay, so let's try to build something here, so I can show you some hang-ups that people usually have with Softimage. The first one is like selecting and picking stuff, which is, most applications you point and click, and for some reason Softimage had this, you had to hold spacebar to do a selection. So we'll get up here on this menu. Let me see here, I forgot to talk about, there's this model panel, which is the purple. Up here on the upper right, these are the different modes that this can change into. So the first purple one is model, which we're going to be in a little. Then there's this motion, which is animation. Got keyframe stuff and constraining and some rigging things here. There's actor, which is like building your skeletons. There's some simulation stuff here, skinning, all that. Then matter, which is the other one we're going to use a lot, which is your materials, your textures, and your rendering. And so there's some secondary tools here which we won't get into. So we're going to go back to this purple mode here, which is the model mode, and we're going to go up to the top button here. We're going to hit get, and it's going to bring up a sub menu. And when you are in a menu, you can just kind of mouse up and down. You don't really have your your pointer anymore. We'll go down to primitive, click again, and then you have all these choices like circle, arc, spiral, square, cube, sphere. We're going to go down here to grid, and we're going to click that. It brings up this option. We want it to be polygon, patch, or nerves. I'll leave it at polygon. The default's like 10 by 10 with a 1 cell size, so we'll hit OK, and it drops that guy in here. And you'll see that even though that's there, you can't click on it or do anything. It's just kind of hanging out there. And that's because the selection mode over here, if you look down here on the right, your selection mode, you can toggle like the selection mode on with space, and then you can also hit all or clear your selection, and that lets you know when you're in there that the space bar is like turning it on. So you'll notice when you press space bar, the little select lights up, and that allows you to click on an item and click on an item again to select it, so you can be selecting things. Right now it's in single mode, which means if we have a second item, it's only going to select one mode at a time. If you're in multi-mode, you can select multiple items at the same time. Like I could do this and a sphere and then move them together. We'll leave it in single mode now. So I'm holding the space bar to get that going. So I'm gonna hold the space bar, click that guy, and let go. Go up to the get again. We'll go to primitive, and we'll go get a sphere. Click on that sphere. Instead of polygon, we're gonna go to here to NURBS, and we're gonna go to cubic. And these are probably set from my last thing. You can move these up and set these steps to like maybe 5 and 5. Oops, I'm gonna turn on the num lock here. 5 and 5. And hit OK. And we don't have. Oh, that's pretty ugly. Okay, that didn't turn out like I wanted. But what we can do, instead of deleting it and get a new one, we can go here. The next most used thing is down in info, and then there's selection. You can hit Q plus S to do that, and it brings up basically this info tab is whatever is selected. It gives you the attributes of what you're selected. So later when we click if we do the grid, it'll show the grid stats. If we do the sphere, it'll show the sphere. If we have lights and cameras, it'll show that information on the get info, and we use that a lot to set the parameters and attributes of the items. Okay, so let's see here. This only has 3. Let's do 2 and 2 and 5 and 5. Let's see, hit OK. There we go. It's a little bit more of a sphere. All right, so the next set of hotkeys are your move, rotate, and scale keys, and these are right next to each other. It's similar to Maya. Maya has WER for the move, rotate, and scale, and Softimage has scale, rotate, and move, which is called translate here, and that's X, C, and V, and they're right next to each other. So you can go X turns on the scale, C turns on the rotation, and T hits the translation. So we have this selected here, and you can see here when this is turned on, the translation is turned on, like the V key turns it on and off. You'll see down here that your left, middle, and mouse buttons tell you what it's doing. So you got the free drag, and you can also do like vertical drag, horizontal drag. So if we just want to constrain it to the vertical, you can hit M, and you can see that even if I move my mouse left and right, it doesn't go anywhere, it just stays vertical. So we'll put that up on there so it's above the grid. And then, okay, so now we've got this is still kind of default. We have to navigate through here. I'm going to hit the space bar and click to deselect, and I'm going to hit the V key again to turn off the translate. So now we've got this little scene here, and we got to look at it, and these are tricky. These are the quick keys, and I'm hoping to find out if these things, if the hotkeys can be arranged so that this could be easier, like Maya or the new XSI, where you have one key and the three mouse buttons determine move, rotate, and zoom. But right now the default ones are the Z key is to drag the camera. So if you hold the Z and the left click, in the perspective, you'll see down here, you hold the Z key, you got drag camera, zoom in, and zoom out. The zoom in and the zoom out are actually like camera settings, so you try to avoid those in the perspective view. It's okay to do them here in these views, you know, like right mouse, middle mouse, and then left mouse to drag, so I can zoom in and out here. But when you do it in the perspective view, it's actually adjusting, so I'm going to hold the Z key and use the left click to move us around here. But in order, if you use the zoom in and zoom out, you're actually changing the field of view. It's like you're changing the lens zoom, which you don't want to do. So if you do end up accidentally hitting that, because it takes a while to get out of that habit, you can go up here to camera, and you can go to reset, and it'll reset the camera. Now, you may not want to reset, you may want to reset the lens, but you may not want to reset your position. And what's great about Softimage is that you have these little squares up here. Will remember, they're little like memory slots for remembering where your camera position is. So if I like, say, this position, I can come up here and left click, or no, middle mouse click, sorry. And then let's say I go here, and I like that, and I can middle mouse click. And then I can left click back and forth between the two positions. And then if you want to empty those, you can right click and get rid of them. So, okay, so we got our Z left click, moves us around the, you know, dragging the camera. But then we have to have the other two modes, which is rotate and really panning in, like pushing the camera forward and back, not zooming the lens. And so the O key on the keyboard, if you hold that down and left click, you'll see you can rotate around. And the M and the middle mouse and the right mouse just constraints. If you use the middle mouse, it only rotates this way. You use the right mouse, it only rotates this way, so you can constrain it if you like a position. You can constrain the orbit around a certain latitude or longitude. And that's holding the O key. And then the last one is P, right next to the O key. It allows you to really push and pull the camera. Now, you'll see down here it says slow, medium, fast. That's the speed. And so if you use the middle mouse, it's like you're getting a little bit more range. If you use the right mouse, it's going to be really sensitive. But it depends on the scene scale. Like if you're small or big, you're gonna know, you're gonna want to have those sensitivities. So if you're in this area where you're doing small detail, you may just want to pan a little bit by moving your mouse by using the left. And if you're in it, need to zoom out quickly, you can right click and, while you're holding that P. So the main keys are Z, O, and P, which are not right next to each other, but at least the O and the P are. But the trick is to learn that when you're holding the Z and you're doing this, you use the left click, because if you use the right or middle or right click, you're going to change the camera again. So I'm going to reset that. All right. Oops. Turn that. All right. So I'm going to pull the Z, left click, O, left click, P, right click. Kind of give us a 3/4 view of our scene here, and then I'm going to go Z in here, and I'm going to go right click to zoom out, and here right click to zoom out, and right click to zoom out until the bigger grid disappears. Now I'm going to hold spacebar, left click that guy, and we're going to scale that up. So again, X, C, and V are your scale, rotate, and translation. Hold the scale. You got the scale X, scale Y, scale Z for your left, middle, and right click. I'm just going to hold the X and the Z, and so I can scale these guys uniform. You can see when I scale, it shows you the numeric value on the tool here. Let's scale this up quite a bit. Alright, spacebar, left click to deselect, and we'll go up here to these. You'll see in these windows here in the upper right, it says shade. So we're going to switch from this wireframe mode, at least in perspective, and we're going to go to the shaded view. And it shows us this, and you'll see that if you use O and hold the O key and left click to do the rotate, because it's not going to have a quick redraw, it switches it to wireframe, but then when you let go, you get the view anyway. It's a pretty fast refresh. But it's like it's helpful, because if your scene gets really busy, it's nice that it switches to this wireframe in case, so you don't get a slow, choppy interaction. and kind of see what you're doing here. So hold P, hold O, hold P, hold Z, left click, hold P, right click. You just kind of get used to that. My fingers are stretched across the keyboard like that too. I got pinky on Z and my pointer finger on the O and the P. I just get used to that. When we do the Maya tutorial, just see that it's easier to do. The Alt key does all of that with the mouse. You just hold one Alt key and it does the move, rotate, zoom. Alright, so let's do, let's set up a light. So we'll go over here to the light. It's up here on the right. Oh, I gotta turn off the scale. Hit X, turn off scale. Turn on the light, and we're gonna define, which is like creating one. Hit that. Brings up our info window. We got a point, infinite spot. I'm gonna use a spotlight, and I'm going to use an area light, which is the mental ray. I have to use that mental ray. I'm gonna go to ray trace shadows. And then we're going to turn the cone angle. This is like how spread the spot is. I'm going to turn this cone angle up to like 90-ish. And the spread angle here is like the soft edge at the edge of the spot. So I'm going to turn this up to like 15, 20. We'll leave all the samples alone. The one thing you will notice though is this Umbra intensity. This is like how transparent the shadow is. To be physically correct, we always want to turn this down to 0. Because there's still a couple of things, and yeah, this is always a default thing that you had to set up, and in XSI you can set it up so that this is the default. We'll turn this all the way down to 0 so you make a perfectly black shadow. Hit OK. Alright, so now our 3D view is a little wonky because now that there's a light in the scene, it's trying to shade it with the light. And you see this little guy here, we're going to have to press Z and right click, or sorry, middle mouse click. Left click, middle mouse click, left click to get in here to see what we're doing. We got this little light down here, and there's also this little guy. If you click that, you see there's a little null. There's like this little X here, and this is its target. You can delete it and just aim and rotate the light as you want, but then they come with space. Select that guy. I'm gonna hit the V for translate. I'm gonna pull this up this way, and you'll see that even though I'm moving it, it's always aiming towards that little. This little guy here. I'll space and click this. So let's do this setup again here. Whoops, no, not that. We're gonna do wireframe. Okay, so we can see it. I'm gonna space. Oh yeah, I selected that little guy here. I'm gonna use the translate, and you'll see that if I move this guy on the right view, you can see that light in the perspective view is trying to aim towards it. So I'll put it down here so it's like kind of pointing through the sphere. And one thing you'll notice is space, left click, select. It is a spotlight, but I told it to be an area light, but the area light is kind of straight up and down. I'm going to hit the X to do scale and hold the X and Z. X and Y, excuse me. Y is this way, X is this way, so it's the left click is going wide, middle mouse click's going up. And that's an area light, so it's going to make a softer shadow. It's a mental ray only feature, but it's not aimed at the light. That's because I didn't set it in the attribute. So we have to go back over here to info, selection, and now we got our light info. Let's go back here and say relative orientation, and then hit OK. You'll see that snaps to the direction it's going. Now we have to go to, we're going to switch from modeling to rendering. We're going to go to matter up here, that's the blue window, and switch back to this shade here. And what we're going to do is we're going to do a test render with mental ray. So there's two ways to render. One is the intended for quick feedback, and the other one is like your final quality render that you render out to a file. I'm going to hold W and pull this window out a little bit more so we get bigger frame. And we go down here. There's a couple buttons down here in the matter menu here now that this has changed. Now that we switched menus, there's a preview and render, and we're going to set up the preview renderer first. We're going to hit preview, and if you hit selection or all, it'll just render those. And then there's subregion, which is like drawing a square in the preview window. We're going to go to the setup menu. And this gives us our settings. And right now, our setup window is set to be this resolution, it's 500 by 323. I'm going to change that to, I'm trying to do settings for even slower indigos and indies. If you have them 640 by 360, this is like a very small HD, like a quarter HD scale. And you see here we have this Softimage renderer here. And what we're going to do is we're going to click that, we're going to switch that over to mental ray. And we're going to go down here into the anti-aliasing and click that, and we're going to turn it on, but we're going to turn the samples even lower. We're going to go down here to -3, and we're going to go to -1. And that'll be okay. And so now we're going to take a look at what we can draw here, and we're going to hit preview all, and it'll draw us a little frame here. It shouldn't take that long because we got our settings really low, so you'll see that it's not aliased very much. The anti-aliasing is really low, and the shadow is really chattery, but it gives you quick feedback, and that's what the preview renderer is for. Is that if you want to change something, let's go back up here to wireframe. If you want to change something and check the render, you can do that quickly. So hold Z, pull down. I still have from the spacebar, I still have this light selected. So select, click again, hit the V key. I'm gonna pull it up here. Then we can hit preview all. And we can see it again, and that's really the intended workflow for your render setups. Let's click this guy. Middle mouse click when you're done. It tells you down there at the bottom. Pops you back out of this mode. Alright, so I'm going to put this guy back down here. And then we'll go back to shade. Hit shade. Okay, so I'm going to spacebar select this guy. Since we're in single mode, it switches automatically. So if I spacebar click, you'll notice it lets go of that and it selects this. If we're in multi-select, it'll select multiple things, and then you're going to have to spacebar on them to select off. So it's just a matter of preference of how you want to work. If you want to move or click multiple things to move multiple things. Right now, I'll just keep it in single mode since I'm setting up. Okay, I'll hit the V to turn off the move. And what we're going to do is a spacebar, select the sphere, and we're going to give this a different material. So we're going to go over here. There's this material button in the matter menu that isn't there. I don't know if it's in the model. Yeah, in the model it's not there. You have to be in matter to check the materials and the textures. Click material, it brings up this material editor. It's going to, every time you bring this up, the first time for an object, it's essentially assigning that object a material. So we'll call this sphere, and we'll leave it. You can make it a blend or a Fong. I'm going to keep it a Fong. I'm going to go to the specular here, and I'm going to turn this down. Or whoops, no, it's specular decay. We want to turn the specular level down, sorry. I left that default. We're just going to turn the specular off. So you got diffuse level here, which is the color and the amount. You got the ambient level here and the specular level. So I'm going to turn the specular levels at full right now. They're default like that. I'm going to grab the red down, green down, blue down, so there's no spec. And then we're going to go over here to reflectivity, which is for ray tracing, and we're going to put this at like 0.150. And then we'll go to diffuse, and we're going to set this color to green. And we're going to go down with red, down with blue, and turn up the green a little bit. And we hit OK. So now we've got that. So let's see. We go down here to preview, all. I've got a green sphere that has, you can see that it even is reflecting the ground, but there's no light in there, and that's because there's no reflection from the light card, and that's because in these older versions of mental ray and many of the old render engines, they didn't treat the light as geometry like it physically would be. So we're going to create a card to put behind the light. So I'm going to spacebar, select the sphere to deselect. We're going to go back up to get, and we're going to go get a primitive, and we're going to go get another grid. It's going to pop out. Leave that polygon on. So we got a pretty good sized grid. And I'm going to hit V, and we're going to translate this guy up here. And I'll use the Z key to move, and then middle mouse to zoom closer. And then we wanted to rotate, so we're going to hit the C key for rotate. And what does it say? Rotate about X. So we're looking at Y, Z, and X. So we're on the X plane, and L is rotate on X. So we're going to rotate this guy here. Kind of make it parallel with the light. Hit the translate, kind of put it behind the light so we won't block the light. We want to make it look like it's about the same size as the light. Hold the Z, hit the middle mouse, left mouse, little mouse, middle mouse, and then we will try to scale this guy. So scale, hit the X, we'll scale this way so it's about as tall as it, and then we'll scale L so it's about as wide as it. It's right behind there. Now we got to give it a material because it's just a diffuse material. So we go back to material and we're assigning it a material. So we'll say light card. And this time we're not going to use Phong, we're going to use constant. It's basically whatever, this is like a light material itself. It won't cast light unless you use GI, but we're going to use it as a light reflector. Just making it bright. Just a physical representation of the area light that's in the room. There. Hit OK. Okay, so now we've got something that looks correct, because if you had a big chimera light in the scene, it would reflect. Like when you're lighting a car, you're going to have lights that reflect on the doors, which are these big chimera lights that DPs would use for lighting, like, you know, metal shiny objects. Alright, let's go down here to preview, hit all, and you got a pretty good looking render here, but it's still low quality, but we you know, gives us a good idea of what we're going to end up in here. So now we're going to go and one thing that's still left to talk about is that you'll notice that when I rendered this guy, oops, cancel. When I preview rendered this guy, that there was like a value there where the shadow's still kind of gray, and the light where the spot isn't hitting is also kind of gray. And we don't have global illumination turned on. That kind of looks like bounced light, which looks good, which is why the default ambient light is set that way. But that's a good cheat when you're not using GI. But if you want to set that level, which might be a little bit too high, besides the fact that we turn the Umbra all the way down, is this atmosphere. Here, if we go over here and click the atmosphere, then there's this thing called ambience. And it's basically filling anywhere that's not lit up with this ambient color. So even if we turned off every light in the scene, you get this kind of general gray, which I think we saw earlier when I turned on the light. So I'm going to turn this down to 0, 0, 0. And now you'll see that when we do a render, preview render, that the shadows are stark black outside the light. So now that's a little bit closer to physically accurate, other than the fact that we were using ambience to kind of create the idea that there's bounced light. And these are defaults that you set up in XSI. You would do like a scene that just, when it opened up, the ambience 0 and the Umbra's set to 0, you know, like so that you don't have these gray values showing up when you don't want them, unless you intend to have them. So we've got a pretty good preview render there. We want to make it look nice. So now we have to up a few things in quality. We're going to go back to the light, spacebar, select the light, go to get info on that, and we have this area sampling here for mental ray, and so these are set at 3, so they're pretty low. I'm going to turn them up to like 6 each. Press 6 for each of those. Hit OK, and then in the preview render we'll do the setup, and we're going to do a bigger one here, 640. Let's do 960 by 540. And then we'll also go down here to the anti-aliasing, and we're going to tighten these up. Like, this is a threshold for anti-aliasing, and then we're going to say min max samples. So we're going to go 0 minimum and 2 max, And oops, I clicked out of that. And then we want these to be 0.1, so it's the contrast ratio between the pixels. Between a dark and bright pixel, it has to get to a 0.1 contrast ratio before it stops sampling. So hit accept, hit OK, and now let's see what this looks like here. We'll do a preview render. Alright, it was an 8-minute, about 8-minute and 30-second render. It's not too bad. Maybe somewhere between 8 and 9 minutes. Okay, looking pretty smooth, other than we don't have any ambient light. It's pretty straightforward and stark, but it's a nice picture. Middle mouse to middle mouse out. Alright. Let's see. On the next one, we'll try to do get more into depth here. I'll go back to model. We'll get more into depth on how to create some other shapes and how to get into the different modes here. So you can go to wireframe, spacebar, select this guy, and we can go into the tag mode, and then we can get into like modifying the verts of the object, changing the shape of it. But right now, let's see here. Let's go get a cube, primitive cube, brings that guy up. If we're in this mode, this is the thing I didn't show you. You can hit F, which is like focus, to zoom into something on any view. So let's say I'm in Z and I'm here, left clicking in there, and I hit F, it's going to center the cube. And then I can hit Z and hit middle or right and zoom out from that. It's a good way of like finding where your object is if your scene isn't centered on there. Over here, I hit F, Z, zoom out. And you know what we want to do? The reason why we zoomed is we'll hit V for translate, middle mouse, drag that up on the plane, and then we can do horizontal drag. A little big. Let's see, X to scale. I'm going to hit all 3 buttons and scale them down uniformly. List size. V for translate. Put them here, but I'll put them on the ground. Okay. Let's see. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to give it more spans, so that down here in the modeling menu, there's a thing called effect. We're going to go all the way down here to, where is it here, subdivision. And I'm going to give it like 3 by 3 by 3 by 3. Hit OK, and then we get this. And the reason why I did that is because I want to do a rounding effect on the cube, and the more spans that you have, the more it'll retain this shape of the cube. So I'll go to effect, rounding, 0.5 is fine. You'll see it's kind of rounded out. Let's see if we hit F. You see I've kind of got like a rounded out shape, and I'm going to do it one more time. Effect, rounding. So it's getting smoother. Normally we would do this in the future. Maya and Softimage have this mode where you can keep the low poly and then you just raise the subdivisions, and it treats it like a NURBS object. Right here, because we're just dealing with raw polygons, we're going to add it as layers. One more. Okay, so now we got a pretty smooth cube. Hit the V for translate, put that on the ground. Hit the C for rotate, use the middle mouse to drag it around so I can kind of see the shade. We're looking at here, rotate. V translate. Let's make that one like red. Go over to matter. Go over to material. Specular down. Diffuse. Make this into a red cube. Super red. reflectivity will be 0.150, so we leave some of that, making it kind of like a Fresnel effect, but it's not really there, but I'll explain Fresnel in another video. So, okay. So you see we got some nice shapes here again. Okay, this time when I render this out, I'm going to go down here to atmosphere. I'm going to turn the ambience back up. So I'm going to put this at like 0.12, 0.12, 15, yeah, 0.15. So now we got like some, you can see here it's already kind of lighting up. That might be too much. I'll just leave it like that. And we'll do another render. And in order for us to do a final render, now instead of using the preview, I'm going to do the render, and we have to set up the render the same way we did the other one. So we had set up the preview render, and we have to tell the final render the same settings as the preview. You can use a preview render separate from the main render. It's best to try to calibrate the preview render for very lower settings of the main engine you're using, and then the render is the final settings. So, but I play with the preview just to see what final settings look like. So we're going to go up here to top, Softimage render down to Mentoray again. I'm going to use a 960 by 540. Anti-aliasing is on. And we're going to do 0.2 again. We're going to use a triangle filter. And it already has the 0.1 as a default here in the final render. And then we can name our file. And we're going to call this test, or basic render. And we're going to use it as a RGB format. And then I don't want to render a bunch, so I'm just going to do 1 to 1. Don't want to render sequence, so render sequence. And then it's going to try to draw an image for each. That'd make an animation if we made an animation, but I'm just rendering on one frame. Alright.